Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I'm continuing my coverage of JoJo Magoo's complete debacle and meltdown at the EU, at the G7 and the meeting with Putin. Here's the post-Putin meeting press conference.
Biden responds.
And Ambassador, here is the president.
Here he comes, looking spry, taking a few running steps out there, showing when he's ready to go.
Been a long
His famous aviator sunglasses on, but no mask.
day for y'all. I know it was easy getting into the pre-meeting. There was no problem getting through those doors, was it? Was there?
Geneva, Switzerland.
Anyway, hello everyone. Well, I've just finished the last meeting of this week's long trip, the U.S.-Russian summit. And I know there were a lot of hype around this meeting, but it's pretty straightforward to me, the meeting. One, there's no substitute, as those of you who have covered me for a while know, for face-to-face dialogue between leaders. None.
Except when you're locked in your basement during COVID and you're hiding behind your basement and mask because you couldn't generate any crowds for an unenthusiastic Democratic base that didn't want to come see you.
And President Putin and I had share a unique responsibility to manage the relationship between two powerful and proud countries. A relationship that has to be stable and predictable. And we should be able to cooperate where it's in our mutual interest. And where we have differences, I want President Putin to understand why I say what I say and why I do what I do.
Everybody knows what JoJo Magoo do.
And how we'll respond to specific kinds of actions that harm America's interest. Now,
there was a minor glitch there, but let's move on.
I told President Putin my agenda is not against Russia or anyone else. It's for the American people. Fighting COVID-19, rebuilding our economy, reestablishing relationships around the world with our allies and friends, and protecting the American people. That's my responsibility as president. I also told him that no president of the United States could keep faith with the American people if they did not speak out to defend our democratic values, to stand up for the universal and fundamental freedoms that all men and women have, in our view.
I bet Putin really enjoyed this part of it as much as you do.
This is part of the DNA of our country. So human rights is going to always be on the table, I told him. It's not about just going after Russia when they violate human rights. It's about who we are. How could I be the President of the United States of America and not speak out against the violation of human rights? I told him that unlike other countries, including Russia.
So it was just a couple hours of you mansplaining your, talking points and things that you obviously don't believe in, or, you believe in them, but you don't realize what's actually happening in reality.
We're uniquely a product of an idea. You've heard me say this before again and again, but I'm going to keep saying it.
I'm sure you are.
What's that idea?
What is that idea, JoJo Magoo?
We don't derive our rights from the government. We possess them because we're born, period.
We possess them because we're born? We possess what rights? Because we're born. And then the government has, what role does the government play then?
And we yield them to a government.
We yield our rights to the government. So we possess the rights when we're born. This is a big gaffe. People have been sending this to me. We possess the rights when we're born, and then we yield them to the government. We'll go back through that.
Yeah. You've heard me say this before again and again, but I'm going to keep saying it. What's that idea? We don't derive our rights from the government. We possess them because we're born, period. And we yield them to a government. And so the form I pointed out to him.
Yeah, you just blew that one. See, he's saying that people were born with rights that they yield to the government, that they give their rights over to the government. But even that is a misunderstanding, because you're not born with rights. I mean, the rights are something that somebody has to be oppressing you, and then you say, well, I have rights. Do you understand this? Like, the rights come in when somebody's trying to enslave you or, control you in some way. And so the rights are there because other people try to control other people. I mean, that's one of the problems with the human species. You're not born with anything, right? You have to fight for it. You look in the animal kingdom, animals are either being hunted or they're hunting other animals or they're fighting for the right to mate or whatever it is. If they have a territory, they have to fight for that territory. I'm not saying that we should be like animals. I'm just saying the animals aren't born with rights, and then people come along, hunt them, and displace them, and then you have a house, and termites come into your house, and mosquitoes come into your house, and you're fighting them off, and their cockroaches come into your house and claim your house for their own. I mean, you don't go to the cockroaches, hey cockroaches, this is my house, I have rights. You have to hire an exterminator or live with them, right?
That's why we're going to raise our concerns about cases like Alexei Navalny. I made it clear to President Putin that we'll continue to raise issues of fundamental human rights, because that's what we are. That's who we are. The idea is we hold these truths self-evident, that all men and women, we haven't lived up to it completely, but we've always widened the arc.
They've widened the arc. This guy's always arc widening. That's one of his specialities.
Commitment, and included more and more people. And I raised the case of two wrongfully imprisoned American citizens, Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed. I also raised the ability of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty to operate, and the importance of a free...
What about Snowden that's living there, that ratted out the American government for violating all our rights and spying on us? What about that guy? I don't hear you mentioning Snowden here.
Free press and freedom of speech.
Barack Obama wanted to extradite Snowden. Come on. This is the big American lie where there claims to be we have all these rights and things like this. It's based in our economic standing. It's based in our being seen as customers, because once that is gone, if the economy changed, then our rights will, that our perceived rights will disappear. And those rights, we're hemorrhaging those rights right now in the past, couple of years because of COVID.
I made it clear that we will not tolerate attempts to violate our democratic sovereignty or destabilize our democratic elections, and we would respond. The bottom line is, I told President Putin that we need to have some basic rules of the road that we can all abide by. I also said there are areas where there's a mutual interest.
So did Putin get to talk at all? Was it just you Magoo-splaining? Were you just Magoo-splaining the whole time?
For us to cooperate. For our people, Russian and American people, but also for the benefit of the world and the security of the world.
See, I mentioned this in my video yesterday or whatever it was, that there's lots of Americans who are rooting against JoJo in his dealings with Putin. I mean, rooting against him in general and rooting against him specifically. They're rooting for Putin, and these are American citizens, and that's how bad it's gotten. And if Trump was in this meeting, there were plenty of people that were rooting against Trump. About half the country rooted against Trump. Now half the country's rooting against Biden. And that's, that shows you everything you need to know. Like, he can say all he wants about this meeting with Putin, but we have a fractured, we have a schism. This is the year of the schism, right? And the divide is growing. And, he's doing nothing, and the Democrats are doing nothing to sort of reconnect people. They're just telling everybody he already said it in his last press conference, that those people who, voted for Trump are a small minority and they don't represent America. And so he said he was going to be a president for both, Democrats and Republicans, but that's only on his terms, right? Same thing he's saying here about Putin, that he can have a relationship with Putin only if Putin buys into all these lies that he's saying.
One of those areas is strategic stability. You asked me many times what was I going to discuss with Putin before I came. I told you I only negotiate with the individual, and now I can tell you what I was intending to do all along. And that is to discuss and raise the issue of strategic stability and try to set up a mechanism whereby we dealt with it. We discussed in detail the next steps our country should take on arms control measures, the steps we need to take to reduce the risk of unintended conflict. And I'm pleased that you agreed today to launch a bilateral strategic stability dialogue.
They're going to talk. There's dialogue happening.
Diplomatic speak for saying get our military experts and our diplomats together to work on a mechanism that can lead to control of new and dangerous and sophisticated weapons that are coming on the scene now.
Right now they're coming on the scene. Now.
That reduce the times of response, that raise the prospects of accidental war.
Accidental wars are the worst kind.
And we went into some detail of what those weapon systems were. Another area we spent a great deal of time on was cyber and cybersecurity.
Cyber, like he knows all about cyber. What is cyber, JoJo? Cybersecurity.
I talked about the proposition that certain critical infrastructure should be off limits to attack, period.
Period. Those things are period.
By cyber or any other means. I gave them a list. If I'm not mistaken,
he's checking it twice.
I don't have it in front of me, 16.
Where is it? Where is that list?
Specific entities.
Magoo, where is that list, Magoo?
16 defined as critical infrastructure under U.S. policy, from the energy sector to our water systems. Of course, the principle is one thing. It has to be backed up by practice.
He's got to practice what he preaches.
Responsible countries need to take action against criminals who conduct ransomware activities on their territory.
On their territory, other people's territory.
So, we agreed to task experts in both our countries to work on specific understandings about what's off limits and to follow up on specific cases.
He gave the classic Joker smile there.
That originate in other countries, in either of our countries. There's a long list of other things we spent time on, from the urgent need to preserve and reopen the humanitarian corridors in Syria so that we can get food, just simple food and basic necessities.
Okay, you and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton wrecked Syria by that illegal war.
People are starving to death. How to build it and how it is in the interest of both Russia and the United States to ensure that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. We agreed to work together there because as much as Russia's interest is ours.
It's all of our interests.
And to how we can ensure the Arctic remains a region of cooperation rather than conflict. I caught part of President Putin's...
Trump? President Trump? Uh-oh. He slipped there right at 9/11, too. Here he goes, right at 9/11 he says it.
Cooperation rather than conflict. I caught part of President
Trump, right here. See, it says it. Boom. What's happening? It's an emergency, Joe. 911. He said Trump, and then he did this. Then he did that face. He said Trump, and that's... Every time he says Trump, that face immediately follows.
Putin's press conference. And he talked about the need for us to be able to have some kind of modus operandi where we dealt with...
You know what? I was hoping you guys would agree on some modus operandi. There's no better operandi than a modus.
Making sure the Arctic was, in fact, a free zone.
It's got to be free zone.
You can't be paying fees to get into the Arctic.
And to how we can each contribute to the shared effort of preventing the resurgence of terrorism in Afghanistan. It's very much in the interest of Russia not to have a resurgence of terrorism in Afghanistan. There are also areas that are more challenging. I communicated the United States' unwavering commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Ukraine, he wants.
We agreed to pursue diplomacy related to the Minsk agreement.
And also maybe your son could get a job there and, make a lot of money, I'm just saying, and smoke crack. Because that's like, he gets the crack. If he gets a job, he gets the crack. He gets to smoke the crack at his job.
I shared our concern about Belarus. He didn't disagree with what happened. He just has a different perspective of what to do about it. But I know you have a lot of questions, so let me close with this.
He's closing with this. This is JoJo's big closing statement. His eyes aren't working right. Looks confused. He's ready. You got to get hyped up, JoJo, and close like you mean it, JoJo.
It was important to meet in person, so there can be no mistake about or misrepresentations about what I wanted to communicate.
And he's a guy with no soul. So when you're talking to a guy with no soul, you got to meet in person. Because, he doesn't have a soul and he's a murderer.
I did what I came to do. Number one.
You did number one, okay. Was that before you went to the meeting with Putin or while you were in the meeting? Did you have depends on what was happening?
Identify areas of practical work our two countries can do to advance our mutual interest and also benefit the world. Two.
You did two.
Communicate directly, that the United States will respond to actions that impair our vital interest or those of our allies. And three, to clearly lay out our country's priorities and our values, so we heard it straight from me.
Straight from the Magoo's mouth. Straight from the Magoo's ghoul hole.
And I must tell you, the tone of the entire meeting, I guess it was a total of 4 hours, was good.
It was a good tone. The tone was pristine.
Positive. There wasn't any strident action
he forgot about that thing I said about his soul and not having one.
taken. Where we disagreed, I disagreed, stated where it was. Where he disagreed, he stated. But it was not done in a hyperbolic atmosphere. That is too much of what's been going on.
By your end, he wasn't talking smack about you. You guys were all the ones worked up, right?
Over this last week, I hope,
he can fly.
The United States has shown the world that we are back, standing with our allies. We rallied our fellow democracies to make concerted commitment.
Concert. He went to a concert. It was the Bee Gees. Maybe it was, where is he, Switzerland? ABBA. He went to an ABBA concert.
To take on the biggest challenges our world faces. And now we've established a clear basis on how we intend to deal with Russia and the U.S.-Russian relationship. There's much more work ahead. I'm not suggesting that any of this is done.
It's not. Come on. You guys were in there for a couple hours.
We've gotten a lot of business done on this trip.
It's a business. This guy's a serious businessman.
And before I take your questions, I want to say one last thing.
I'm sure you do. Is this your second or third last thing?
Folks, look.
Okay, we're looking.
What's this about?
What's it about?
We move from here.
How do we move from here? Okay, what is it?
I listened to, again, a significant portion of what President Putin's press conference was. And as he pointed out, this is about practical, straightforward, no-nonsense decisions.
Boom, no nonsense.
That we have to make or not make. We'll find out.
Did he nutmeg you?
Within the next 6 months to a year, whether or not we actually have a strategic dialogue that matters. We'll find out whether we work to deal with...
Yeah, World War III's coming, Joe, just admit it.
With everything from release of people in Russian prisons or not. We'll find out.
We're going to find out.
Whether we have a cybersecurity arrangement that begins to bring some order. Because look, the countries that most are likely to be damaged, failure to do that, are the major countries.
What major countries are those?
For example, when I talked about the pipeline that cyber hit for $5 million, that ransomware hit in the United States, I looked at him and I said, well, how would you feel if ransomware took on the pipelines from your oil fields? He said it would matter.
He said it would matter.
This is not about just our self-interest. It's about a mutual self-interest. I'll take your questions, and as usual, folks, they gave me a list of the people.
Yeah, they gave him a list. Who's they? Tell me who they is. I want to know who they is. Can they stand up, please?
Well, I'm going to call on. So, Jonathan, Associated Press.
Thank you, sir. U.S. intelligence has said that Russia tried to interfere in the last two presidential elections and that Russia groups are behind hacks like SolarWinds and some of the ransomware attacks you just mentioned. Putin, in his news conference just now, accepted no responsibility for any misbehavior. Your predecessor opted not to demand that Putin stop these disruptions. So what is something that concrete, sir, that you achieved today to prevent that from happening again, and what will the consequences you threaten him?
Whether I stopped it from happening again, he knows I will take action.
He knows that next time is the last time. First of all, I have to repeat this again. I read the report. It was a joint intelligence between the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI about Russia interfering in the election. And I would say about 60 to 70% of that came from Russia Today, the YouTube channel Russia Today, as opposed to the mainstream media channels and national networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, CNN, and MSNBC, that were all for Clinton.
So our intelligence community said that in terms of their belief that the Russians interfered in the 2016 election, that about 60% of that interference was to do with a YouTube channel, Russia Today. That the Russia Today YouTube channel somehow, by putting out what they consider propaganda, affected the election, even though the majority of TV networks were completely biased for Clinton, right? The news networks were completely on Clinton's side. And, Hollywood and all these other. The majority of media was supporting Clinton. And so what the intelligence community tried to say was that this guy Guccifer, who was a hacker, was paid by Julian Assange to do the hacking on, these guys who got hacked, right? The DNC got hacked, the Democratic National Committee got hacked, and Podesta got hacked. And they blamed that on Russia funding Julian Assange and all that stuff. But they didn't provide any proof. And then they said Russia Today was bashing Clinton, and Russia Today gets less views than I do. Russia Today has less influence than I do. And, no people who are going to vote for Hillary Clinton watch Russia Today. And so this, when these reporters say this like it's fact, when in the report they say we can say this with extreme confidence or high confidence, extreme confidence means they're sure, high confidence, moderate confidence, and they don't provide any proof. They're just saying, trust us, we're the spies, right? And so, we got to throw that out there.
Like we did when this last time out. What happened was we, in fact, made it clear that we were not going to continue to allow this to go on. The end result was we ended up withdrawing. They ended up withdrawing ambassadors. We closed down some of their facilities in the United States, etc. He knows there are consequences. Now look.
There are consequences.
One of the consequences.
And they're not talking about how America went in during the Arab Spring and wrecked these various countries, went into Afghanistan with no real reason, a bogus reason, went into Iraq with even a more bogus reason, went into Libya and Egypt and had regime changed in Libya, which was a horrible, illegal, and immoral war. And then all the times that the CIA, going back to Iran and the Operation Ajax, where they got rid of a moderately elected, he was a moderate, back when Iran was great, Mossadegh, and they destroyed Iran to what it is now. The country is completely effed because of what the CIA did and is now admitted to. And so don't come in here with all this high, how much better we are than everybody else, right? When we have, as much blood or more blood on our hands than any other country.
That I don't know, I shouldn't say this, it's unfair of me.
It's just unfair. He might know with, moderate confidence. Magoo.
Suspect you may all think doesn't matter. But I'm confident matters to him, I'm confident matter to him, and other world leaders of big nations. his credibility worldwide shrinks. Let's get this straight.
Yeah, like your credibility. Come on, bro. Like you don't have credibility in your own country. Half the people think you're a complete frickin' tool. You know, JoJo Magoo. I compare you to Mr. Magoo, and people agree with me, JoJo.
How would it be if the United States were viewed by the rest of the world as interfering with the elections directly of other countries?
We've done that over and over again. The CIA, the NSA, the CIA and the FBI, CIA particularly, has done that over and over again. You're saying the America has never interfered with other countries? Big giant cursor knows when there's a goofy, Magoo liar up there, gooling it up.
And everybody knew it. What would it be like?
Everybody kind of does know it.
If we engage in activities that he is engaged in, it diminishes the standing of a country that is desperately trying to make sure it maintains its standing as a major world power. And so it's not just what I do, it's what the actions that other countries take, in this case Russia, that are contrary to international norms. It's the price they pay. They are not able to dictate what happens in the world.
So you are, America is, and so that's the thing. Because America, not Russia, invaded 5 countries in the Middle East, and they were going for 7. They didn't get to Iran, and they got knocked off by Russia and Syria. And this is what this is all about. Again, I'm not a fan of Putin. I'm not a fan of Russia, and I live in America, and so I benefit from these actions. I mean, I am at least aware, many of you guys aren't, that we all personally benefit from the evil deeds done by these guys. Like our country would economically would have collapsed if we didn't do that awful, horrible war in Libya. We all benefited from it. It was Obama and Biden and Clinton doing the dirty work for us in the UN to keep the petrodollar from collapsing. But what happened in Syria was, after all those illegal invasions in the Middle East, Russia said, no, we're not allowing you to do that, and they stopped the invasion of Syria. America started crying, Hillary Clinton and Shillery Clinton and Barack Obama's and Biden all started crying because Russia, war blocked us in Syria.
There are other nations of significant consequence, i.e. the United States of America being one of them.
Mr. President, just a quick follow on the same theme of consequences. You said just now that you spoke to him a lot about human rights. What did you say would happen if opposition leader Alexei Navalny dies?
I made it clear to him that I believe the consequences of that would be devastating for Russia. I'll go back to the...
Okay, what specifically did you threaten him with? Like, what did you gotta, did you threaten him with something, and what was it?
Same point. What do you think happens when he's saying it's not about hurting Navalny, all the stuff he says to rationalize the treatment of Navalny, and then he dies in prison? I pointed out to him that it matters a great deal.
It matters. That matters.
When a country, in fact, and they asked me why I thought it was important to continue to have problems with the president of Syria. I said, because he's a violation of international norm.
No, it was because you guys want to invade there. Obama droned kids, MNFer. You're a part of that, bro. Droning kids, ratting out whistleblowers, all of these illegal wars, you're a part of that. I don't like, this double standard and not being honest about what we are, right? Trying to pretend we're the good guys and the heroes.
It's called a chemical weapons treaty. Can't be trusted. It's about trust. It's about their ability to influence other nations in a positive way. Look, would you like to trade our economy for Russia's economy? Would you like to trade? And by the way, we talked about trade. I don't have any problem with doing business.
Yeah, but that's not the same. We use the word trade. We like to trade Russia's economy with our economy. And, we talked about trade. Just I used the word trade in a different way in the earlier sentence. So with my random selection, I'm now going to talk about trade between us and Russia because, that's how JoJo Magoo's mind works.
with Russia, as long as they do it based on international norms. It's in our interest to see the Russian people do well economically. I don't have a problem with that. But if they do not act according to international norms, then guess what? That won't happen with us. It will not happen with other nations. And he kind of talked about that, didn't he, today? About how the need to reach out to other countries to invest in Russia. They won't, as long as they are convinced that, in fact, the violations, for example, the American businessman who was in house arrest, and
What is that businessman's name? You said it earlier.
I pointed out, you want to get American business to invest, let him go. Change the dynamic.
Is he a spy, JoJo?
Because American businessmen, they're not.
American businessman. He's not a cover for a CIA agent. No, he's American businessman. He's not been the CIA.
We're ready to show up. They don't want to hang around in Moscow. Look, guys. I know we make foreign policy out to be this great, great skill.
But I've demonstrated you don't need any skill at all to do foreign policy.
That somehow is sort of like a secret code.
He doesn't know any secret codes.
All foreign policies is a logical extension of personal relationships. It's the way human nature functions.
And you know what? Does that mean you smelled Putin's wife's hair? Is that what you're getting at here? Or did you snoozle Putin himself? Did you bite Putin's scalp?
And understand, when you run a country that does not abide by international norms, and yet you need those international norms to be somehow managed so that you can participate in the benefits that flow from them, it hurts you.
Just be normal. Just abide by international norms.
That's not a satisfying answer. Biden said he'd invade Russia. It's not. By the way, that was a joke.
That was a joke, you guys. Look, my sunglasses don't lie.
That's not true.
It's not true. He's not. I didn't say that.
But my generic point is, it is more complicated than that. David Sanger. I thought I just saw David. There he is.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the run-up to this discussion, there's been a lot of talk about the two countries spilling down into a Cold War. And I'm wondering if there was anything that you emerged from in the discussion that made you think that he...
Your permission, I'm going to take my coat off. The sun is hot.
Yeah, your permission. We'll give you permission, JoJo Magoo.
Anything that would make you think...
Just don't have any pit stains, buddy. That's all we ask.
That Mr. Putin has decided to move away from his fundamental role as a disruptor.
He's a disruptor. He's a disruptor in chief.
Particularly a disruptor of NATO and the United States. And if I could also just
I think he's just paying attention to his coat. I don't think Magoo is actually listening.
Follow up on your description of how you gave him a list of critical infrastructure in the United States. Did you lay out very clearly what it was that the penalty would be for interfering in that critical infrastructure? Did you leave that vague? Did he respond in any way to it?
And when you said the things, your list of critical infrastructure, does that mean everything that's not on the list is fair game?
Let me answer your first. Well, I'll answer your second question first.
That's not the way you do it, JoJo. Answer the third question second, and the first question third, and the second question fourth, and there was no fifth question.
I pointed out to him we have significant cyber capability, and he knows it. He doesn't know exactly what it is, but it's significant.
It's significant. We got the cyber capability up the wazoo.
And if in fact they violate these basic norms, we will respond.
We're going to respond. There's going to be some responses. Don't you worry.
Cyber
ways. We're going to cyber respond on the cyber things.
He knows. In the cyber way.
In the cyber way. We're going to go the cyber way.
Number two.
That was number two. You answered number two first. Now you're on number one. Now you're lost because now you got your numbers confused, Magoo.
I think that the last thing he wants now is a Cold War.
Well, I think that may be the first thing because you got your questions wrong.
Without quoting him, which I don't think is appropriate, let me ask you a rhetorical question. You got a multi-thousand-mile border with China. China's moving ahead, hell-bent on election, as they say, seeking to be the most powerful economy in the world, the largest, and the most powerful military in the world. You're in a situation where your economy is struggling. You need to move it in a more aggressive way than in terms of growing it.
Sounds like he should partner with China.
And I don't think he's looking for a Cold War with the United States. I don't think it's about as I said to him, I said, your generation and mine are about 10 years apart. This is not a kumbaya moment, as he used to say back in the 60s.
You mean what? You didn't have any kumbaya moments?
In the United States, like, let's hug and love each other.
That's what JoJo do.
But it's clearly not in anybody's interest, your country's or mine, for us to be in a situation where we're in a new Cold War. And I truly believe he thinks that. He understands.
He does understand that.
That. But that does not mean he's ready to, quote, figuratively speaking, lay down his arms and say, come on. He still, I believe, is concerned about being, quote, encircled. He still is concerned that we, in fact, are looking to take him down, etc. He still has those concerns. But I don't think they are the driving force as the kind of relationship he's looking for with the United States. Jennifer Jacobs.
It's just good they give him a list.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. Is there a particular reason why the summit lasted only about 3 hours? We know you had maybe allotted 4 to 5 hours. Was there any
Nap time. He needed nap time.
reason it ran shorter? Also, President Putin said that there were no threats or scare tactics issued. Do you agree with that assessment, that there were no threats or scare tactics?
Yes.
And also, did you touch on Afghanistan and the safe withdrawal of troops?
Yes, and yes. Let me go back to the first part. The reason it didn't go longer is when the last time two heads of state have spent over 2 hours in direct conversation across the table, going into excruciating detail. You may know of time, I don't. I can't think of one. So we didn't need, as we got through, when we brought in the larger group, our defense, our intelligence, and our foreign, my foreign minister wasn't foreign minister, my Secretary of State was with me the whole time, our ambassador, etc. We brought everybody in. We had covered so much. There, we looked at each other like, okay, what next?
His ability to read other people and be aware of what's going on in the room is suspect and questioned. And he had this moment where he looked at Putin and Putin looked at him and they were like, what's next?
What is going to happen next is we're going to be able to look ahead in 3 to 6 months and say,
Are you looking ahead or looking back?
did the things we agreed to sit down and try to work out, did it work? Are we closer to a major strategic?
You mean in 3 months we're going to look back, or now we're going to look ahead to 3 months?
Stability talks and progress? Are we further along in terms of?
I mean, the guy is just not there, right? He's horrible at communicating, and this is all remedial stuff.
Go down the line. That's going to be the test. I'm not sitting here saying because the president and I agreed that we would do these things that all of a sudden it's going to work. I'm not saying that.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying is I think there's a genuine prospect to significantly improve the relations between our two countries without us giving up a single solitary thing based on principle and our values.
Kablow.
No. There were no threats. There were
no threats.
As a matter of fact, I heard he quoted my mom and quoted
He quoted your mom.
other people today.
Did you tell stories about your mom? I think he was mocking you is what.
It was very, as we say, which will shock you coming from me, somewhat colloquial. And we talked about basic fundamental things. There was
that he had no soul and he's a murderer.
It was, and you know how I am. I explain things
Yeah, we unfortunately do.
Based on personal basis.
Exactly. You get to those personal stories. Sometimes those personal stories are other people's personal stories that you tell that, like, they're your stories, that cost you your first presidential election and pretty much all your credibility when you lifted speeches and started to pretend your family was doing things. You had family members that were really other people's family members, remember?
What happens if, for example? And so there were no threats, just simple assertions made, and no, well, if you do that, then we'll do this.
Well, that's the whole basis when you said that's how you're going to have to deal with him, that you couldn't trust him, you'd have faith in him, and then you were saying that you had to promise consequences, not just general. Well, we'll take action. There will be consequences. That's not, Mister. Like
I said, it was just letting him know where I stood, what I thought we could accomplish together, and what, in fact, if there were violations of American sovereignty, what we would do.
Except without threatening anything specifically. Smell my finger. I just got to smell my finger for a little bit. Just give me a moment to smell my finger, and then we could get back to the press conference.
No, he asked us about Afghanistan. He said that he hopes that we're able to maintain some peace and security, and I said that has a lot to do with you. He indicated that he was prepared to, quote, help on Afghanistan. I won't go into detail now, and help on Iran, and help on, and in return we told him about what we wanted to do relative to bringing some stability and economic security, or physical security, to the people of Syria and Libya. So we had those discussions.
Two countries that America wrecked. Okay, America took a legal action. The Libya thing was brutal, and I've covered this so much, I'll just talk about it briefly here. But what happened was Gaddafi had done a great job with his country. And I'll show I have some compilation of some of the Libya stuff. Hopefully it'll sort of match up here. But Gaddafi was doing a great job with his country. He had taken the poorest country in Africa that he took over with a bloodless coup. There was a King Aziz that was a puppet leader put in by Italy. Italy had invaded Libya. They're close. Italy is close to the northern part of Africa. And they invaded and took over Libya, and they put in a king, the only king that Libya ever had, King Aziz. And the guy was a monster and a horrible leader. And Gaddafi was the guy in charge of the military. And King Aziz left the country, and Gaddafi said, don't come back. And that was it. He took over the country. He was eccentric, but he did a lot of good things, and the people, 70% of the people approved of what he did. And he brought in, he had this great man-made river that he had, where he took glacial water and he greened the desert. And this is technology that's now been stolen from him that he developed. He used the resources. There's all this natural resources and various types of precious metals and oil and things there. And he used the resources. And instead of, like other leaders, taking it for himself, he distributed among the people. And he took the country that was the poorest in Africa and made it the richest in Africa. And he had a 10,000, and they had the highest levels of income, employment income of any country in Africa. He was on schedule to achieve the Millennium Development Goals by 2015, and he got rid of all his weapons of mass destruction, all these things. But then he decided to sell oil in a gold dinar, which was a threat to the petrodollar and would have brought down the world economy and, America in general. So the UN and America made up a bunch of bogus lies that said he was torturing and killing his people, and they went in, they took him out, and, in an illegal war that Great Britain came back and said, yeah, it was based in lies, and Hillary Clinton emails said, this was the real reason. It didn't have anything to do with the BS reason the UN and America and France gave to go in there and do regime change and take his resources. And JoJo and Obama were a big part of that, Hillary Clinton. And then Gaddafi was murdered in a bad way. And so, I've covered this so much. And Russia had nothing to do with it, right? Russia wasn't involved. This was America doing bad things.
Yamish.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. Did you say that you didn't issue any threats? Were there any ultimatums made when it
Let's. He just said general stuff.
comes to ransomware? And how will you measure success, especially when it comes to these working groups on Russian meddling and on cybersecurity?
Well, it's going to be real easy. They either, for example, on cybersecurity, are we going to work out where they take action against the ransomware criminals on Russian territory? They didn't do it. I don't think they planned it in this case. And are they going to act? We'll find out. Will we commit? What can we commit to act in terms of anything affecting, violating international norms that negatively affects Russia? What are we going to agree to do? And so I think we have real opportunities to move. And I think that.
Okay, I'm just going to end it there because I'm tired of listening to JoJo. I got one more video to do tomorrow. Hopefully that'll be it. But the guy failed. Like, he's just not coherent. I mean, he's not able to. He promised things. Like, he threatened Putin, right? Like, when he said he was going to run against Donald Trump, he said he was going to beat Trump like a drum in the debate. He gets aggressive. He challenges people to push-up contests. He gets all macho, whatever it is. And he said that he was going to take on Putin. And now it comes in that he was working in a collegial way, right? That's what his word. And that he wasn't issuing any threats and ultimatums, which is things that he promised during the campaign that would be completely different when he and Putin met and compared to Putin and Trump, right? But it wasn't different at all. And this is just JoJo, failing again. Only spirituality will save this world, President Magoo. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.